Okay, so now we've switched over to soybean. The first thing when scouting soybean, you want to make sure you know what growth stage you're at to better assess what threshold levels you might be at for insects, as well as if you're trying to assess whether to put out a foliar or fungicide application. So when you pull back the plant canopy, majority of the time you're always going to be wanting to look at the top 4 nodes of the plant. And if at any of those nodes you have, if you still have all flowers, that would be R2. R3 is when you have at least a 1/4 inch pod, thereabouts, at one of these positions. And so here we have about a 1/4 inch pod right next to this kudzu bug, well, 2 kudzu bugs. And so this is probably just getting into R3, leaving R2. So it's a good time to start scouting on a regular basis for foliar diseases to decide if we need to possibly put out an application. And the kudzu bugs, while I've been scouting some fields just today, they've been pretty prevalent. It's not the adults that will trigger an application, it will be the immatures. And so it's still best to do a sweep net to really assess what population you have. Other things I'm seeing, just insect-wise, some defoliation on leaves. But again, usually we overestimate the defoliation on leaves. This is very, very low amount of defoliation, and especially when you look across the entire plant canopy and across your field. But it's just something to take note of, that most likely there is probably either a caterpillar and or beetle that has been feeding on some of the leaves. I have started to see some frog eye leaf spot develop in soybeans. It's still at very, very low levels, and it's going to be dependent upon your variety. Not only will it be dependent upon your variety if you'll see it or not, but the way it looks. And so there's some pictures that'll come up that'll show the differences that you might see. And this is actually, I think, a good example right here. This variety, this is most likely frog eye leaf spot, but it doesn't really look like the typical frog eye leaf spot. Underneath it, if you were to throw this under a microscope, as I did earlier, there's actually a little sporulation going on right there. But it's not the typical lesion we would see for frog eye leaf spot. Usually they're very distinct, more oval shaped, but still this darker border. And then again, though, to differentiate frog eye leaf spot from just chemical burn, that's when you usually flip it over and you look for that sporulation. So possibly with a hand lens, you might be able to see this sporulation, or as it develops a little bit more, you'll be able to see it. The other thing is, again, knowing what has gone out in the field. If you're seeing it all in one layer, again, it's more likely that it's some kind of injury. Versus frog eye leaf spot, it will be getting on the newer growth in the upper canopy. Just like in cotton, you want to pull the canopy back too to make sure you're looking at what's going on in that lower canopy. Most of the time, what you'll find in every field is some Septoria brown spot going on, but a lot of those leaves that it's getting ready to kind of knock off aren't going to be big contributors to yield. And so it's only when it's getting up out of that lower canopy that it would be of concern. Also in the lower canopy, I have started to see some target spot develop in soybean. Again, in soybean, it's variety dependent. Cotton, all cotton varieties that we know of are susceptible to target spot, but it does vary in the level of target spot that they could get. And so again, really knowing your growth stage and scouting to see the disease pressure you have in your field is best to determine your fungicide application timing and if one's actually required. Right now, this field in particular behind me is very clean. Even though it is into R3, I would not necessarily pull the trigger on this. I'd wait until R4, continue to assess the insects and the thresholds. The longer you can hold off fungicide application, the more likely you might actually get an advantage of pairing it with an insecticide based on your threshold levels for insecticide. Rarely, if ever, at R3 would it be an advantage to pair it with an insecticide. And more, just depending on the variety you have and the pressure in your field, I recommend trying to delay that fungicide application a little bit past R3 to get you through to the end of the season, get you protection through R5 if at all possible. But again, if you're easily finding frog eye leaf spots, or your Septoria brown spot or target spot is moving out of that lower canopy, you definitely want to consider a fungicide application.